When I kept going to San Quentin, I was struck by the humanity of the men inside. And each of them had a story to tell. Each of them was unique. Each of them had situations that brought them there that could have happened to any one of us. And I felt that their stories needed to be told because they are the voiceless in prison. When people look at a prison, they look at lockup on television. They think that people are inhumane and animals and that there's nothing about them redeemable. Just lock them up and throw away the key. And I knew otherwise. I knew it from my experience in meeting these men who were hardened criminals. They're called that. They'd murdered. They'd raped. They'd committed armed robbery. But they'd been inside for 25, 30 years, and they were no longer those gangbangers that had gotten in such trouble. And their stories were not being told. And a lot of people are writing academic books about it, and they're wonderful books. But the public perception is a misperception, and I wanted to write that misperception. It changed quite a bit. When I started, it was really going to be my life with lifers. And then I realized that my voice was not the best voice to tell this story. The voice of the men, the voices of the men, the voices of the students who met these men, the voices of the college professors who came in with me and met these men were fascinating voices, different perspectives. And I felt that if my voice was the glue, but the men told their very painful stories, and then the students who were young and impressionable and watched lockup and believed it all, if they met these men, they could go out and they could educate their peers. So I wanted their voices in there too. And then I also had brought in college professors, and they too were shocked by the humanity of the people that we met. And one professor, in fact, was a physics professor, and when she went in, she usually gives lectures and describes microwaves and how they work, or all the electronics. Well, these men don't see these things. They don't use computers. So all of the stories she was going to use were inappropriate, and she realized how their lives were so narrowed from the larger world, and that was a shock to her. So I wanted these stories all to be told so that people would understand from all kinds of different perspectives. Well, actually, I adore historical fiction. And so it isn't, I don't read nonfiction, although I write nonfiction. So my stories are all about kings and queens and people in earlier eras. You know, I love Ken Follett's Fall of Giants and, World Without End and those kinds of stories because I love to get lost to history. But probably the classic work that was nonfiction that influenced me and might even be part of the voice here is Living My Life by Emma Goldman. And her story was, she was so committed to change. She was a revolutionary. I might have once thought I was, but I certainly am not. But her authenticness, and I realized I've written 4 other books. All of those other books were academic. I wanted a real story, a story about people inside and about me interacting with them. And so I think maybe Living My Life and the reality and authenticness of her biography probably did it. Well, I have to say this was the easiest book I've ever written. I just sat down and it came out. You know, I had one book that took me 7 years, and it was like giving the gestation period of an elephant. It was exhausting and painful, and why was I doing it? This one, I sat down every morning when I had time, and every chapter just came. And I also have to say the internet has made my scholarship and my writing, this isn't a scholarly work, but my writing so much easier. I wanted to know about Elmira Correctional Facility. I could Google it and get the story of the history of which before you always had to go to the library and dig out the books. And so it came together very quickly. I was able to write this in the off hours of one entire summer, which is probably the quickest I've ever written a book. The process is easy. Some people find it, what's that line of Dorothy Parker, I do not like to write, I like to have written. I would say that was true for my earlier books. This one, I loved writing it. I wanted to tell this story. I had something to say. I feel like I really want to influence social policy. I believe that people have not got a clue about the kind of population I've written about. They write about death row. They write about people who are, the gangbangers. They don't know the long-timers in prison and how they've transformed. Old people in prison and how they are no longer a danger. And so I had something that I just wanted the world to know. So I felt like I was, channeling a story. Well, I would like to appeal to logic because of the economic conditions of our country at this time. This is a population that, if decarcerated, could save us millions of dollars. So logically speaking, it makes sense to do something about it. But I know that this is an emotional issue. And, we are in a get tough on crime era. We do not believe in rehabilitation. Lock them up, throw away the key, forget about them. And so I'm going to not forget about them. That's my job. I have friends who are ex-cons. I didn't start out having friends who were ex-cons, but now I have several. And their stories are so compelling. Their lives are so dark. And they're there because of poverty and the lack of good education. And, I will die at some point, still fighting this fight. Ever since I was 5, I've been fighting this fight. And I'm educating 200 students every semester on these issues. And I feel like I have a message and I have to convey it. The other thing is that to have a meaningful life, a life of purpose, you must give back. It's the giving, not the taking, that gives life meaning. And I get enormous meaning out of this work. And so it's selfish. And so I can fight the good fight because it makes me feel good. I'd say a lot of people. Certainly, my father, living through what he lived through, coming out the other side, honoring his family, being a good man in the world, a religious man in the world. And then, my rebellion in reading Emma. I mean, Emma was my role model probably for 25 years of my life. But that, she was a revolutionary, and I discovered I was not. I'm truly, probably a reformist, if anything. And although I once thought I was a radical, or an anarchist even, but I'm not. But there have been people all along, role models. And so recently I've had fabulous opportunities to spend time with Angela Davis and learn about prisons, with Cornel West and spend time studying with him and learning from him. I spent time with Desmond Tutu. I've had remarkable opportunities to touch the hands of people who truly influence our society, public intellectuals. And although I would never believe that I'm a public intellectual, not of their caliber, that's who I want to be. I feel like I need to leave a legacy. And books are a legacy, children are a legacy. I built a Holocaust and Genocide Grove at Sonoma State University to honor genocide survivors of Rwanda, Cambodia, the Holocaust. And so I'm trying to find ways to influence society. And maybe I'm Don Quixote and I'm tilting at windmills, but there has to be people who keep doing this because otherwise all is lost. I have 3 in my head right now. The first one is a memoir because I've been a member of every social movement since the 1950s. You name it, I was part of it. The anti-war movement, the women's movement. I was an anarchist for a while. you know, whatever, the gay rights movement, all of that stuff. So I think my memoir, situating myself in those social movements, sort of doing social history with myself as a case study, will probably be one thing I'm going to write. The second one is some dear friends of mine and I are, of course, we're aging. And we have a little book in mind called Restore, Renew, Repair, or something like that. 5 feminists speak of aging in community. And we were going to write our stories around spirituality and health and having a community to age with. So I'll probably do that and help edit it. And then the third one, recently an academic press approached me and said, would I like a contract? Well, how do you turn down an academic press contract? Maybe I will, but nonetheless, I'm going to consider it. And it's a criminology field, and I was thinking I might like to do global perspectives on treatments of batterers, because a lot of progress has been made since I began working in domestic violence and working with perpetrators of domestic violence. So 3 in my head right now, but, you know, I'm open, whatever comes.